Hi everybody, Mike Beer here with your DRF race of the day for Wednesday. We're going to close out the card at Monmouth Park on Wednesday, race number 8. It is the Jersey Shore Stakes. It's for 3-year-olds. They're going to sprint 6 furlongs on the main track. Let's take a look at this field of 10 because it's a pretty good field. They got some good horses signed on to this race, led by, you can see there, number 3, Premier Star. He's the 2-to-1 morning line favorite as he drops out of a grade 2 at Saratoga. Second choice on the line, number 1, Meru. This is a horse who began his career with some real ability. Looked like he had a lot of potential. He was last seen over at Laurel facing some really tough older horses. He's back in with straight 3-year-olds for this race. The number 4, Gandy Dancing, and the number 7, As Seen on TV. They're both 4-to-1 on the line. Gandy Dancing, a New York bred, shipping in for Chad Brown off of a win, As Seen on TV, cutting back in distance, getting some class relief here. A horse who hasn't sprinted in quite a while, but he ran in some major races earlier this year for 3-year-olds to no avail. And there are even some horses at bigger prices on the line who are far from impossible in this race. This is actually a very strong field. There's a lot going on in here. It feels like, one of those races where perhaps a lot of different horses could get involved at the end. Let's begin by taking a look at the Timeform US pace projector. See how Timeform US sees this thing. You can see that they have 3 horses right up close there. It seems like they're going to be battling the pace. They're not calling for a fast pace. There's no red bar scenario here, but you feel like with 3 horses up there, very close together on the lead, they're probably going to be racing early. At least that's how Timeform US sees it. They have Meru up there breaking from the rail. Certainly possible that they'll have to use his speed right from the get-go in here. They also have Premier Star up there, the favorite. Paco Lopez can be aggressive with this horse. He does have speed. If he's up close to the pace, he can certainly be effective that way, but he's also shown that he can be effective without being on the lead. So we'll see how Paco decides to play that. We'll see what kind of start he gets off to as well as he breaks down towards the inside. They also have the 8, Johnny Ritt, up there as part of the pace. I can certainly see that. I don't know if Johnny Ritt is good enough to beat this field, but he does seem like a horse who wants to be forward. He's won 3 times in his career. All 3 of those wins either when he was on the lead or he was right up there contesting the pace. It feels like that's his preferred running style, so I will expect to see him going forward in this race right from the start. Let's take a look at some of the contenders, though, here. We'll start with Meru as he breaks from the rails. Mentioned he's 7-2 on the line. I just think this horse makes some sense. He was very promising as a young horse. He won the first 2 starts of his career right here at Monmouth Park. Very impressive first time out winning. He came right back and won the Smoke Glacken in his second start. And he won that Smoke Glacken over As Seen on TV with a 95 buyer speed figure in just his second career start as a 2-year-old. That was a very impressive win. And that's been it for him so far. He has not won since that race. He did not stretch out that effectively at Aqueduct in his final start as a 2-year-old. He did, however, come back off the layoff this year, sprinting at Churchill Downs. A pretty tough allowance race, I thought, back on May 25th. The winner of that race, Echo Town, would come back to win the Grade 1 H. Allen Jerkins at Saratoga a couple of starts later. That was a really good field. Meru, didn't get the greatest trip in the world that day. I don't want to give him, some huge excuse for that race. He was off the pace. He came wide to the stretch. And he just wound up in between horses coming down to about the 8th pole. It looked like he maybe got a little intimidated, steadied slightly, backed out of that spot, and then he re-rallied and finished a close start. I thought all in all, as a jumping off point as a 3-year-old, that was a fine performance. He did not run that well in the Woody Stevens. They tried him in that Grade 1 at Belmont Park. He was up close to the pace and faded. I don't care about the turf try after that. And then last time, they just took him to Laurel. They ran him in the Polynesian against some really good older horses. Eastern Bay and Lakey, who ran 1-2 in that race, they would come back in their next start, the DeFrancis Dash at Laurel, and run 1-2 again, that time with Lakey, getting the better of it. But they're 2 really solid older horses. Meru also broke from the rail that day. You know what? He just didn't run that well. They sent him up to the early lead. Lakey came after him, and Meru was just no match. I realized that they are good older horses. I felt like perhaps Meru should have run a little bit better than he did in that spot. He is certainly a rebound candidate in here, and we'll just see what kind of price he goes off at. Around 7-2. I guess I won't argue too hard with it. If he drifts a little bit off that, he becomes more interesting in my eyes. The 2 is Bright Dawn. He's 30-1 on the line. He looks completely overmatched to me. Premier Star, I do think he's the horse to beat. He's the morning line favorite at 2-1. As mentioned in the Open, they ran him in the Amsterdam over a wet track at Saratoga last year, the Grade 2 against Yupon. And Yupon's just one of the top sprinters in the country right now. He's a 3-year-old who's undefeated at this point on his way into the Breeders' Cup. And he just looks really good. And, Yupon got to the lead that day. Premier Star was, off the pace towards the outside. I thought, he ran fine to finish third. He was never threatened that race. But I thought he ran fine to finish third there over a wet track. Prior to that, he had run really well in an allowance race against some older horses. He managed to get to the lead that day. Again, I don't necessarily feel like he has to be on the lead, but he managed to get to the front that day. Opened up a big lead, just traveled very strongly throughout that race, opened up a big lead on that field through the turn, and he was just much the best. And prior to that, when they ran him against Eastern Bay, a horse who just finished ahead of Meru, he ran a lot better than it looks in that race. He stumbled very awkwardly at the start. He wound up way back off the pace. He made a big wide run in there. He only wound up finishing 6th at the end, but that's a much better performance than it looks like on paper. I just think this horse is good. I do think he's the horse to beat, and I think he's going to be forward in this race without, necessarily having to be on the lead. But if he gets there, there's certainly nothing wrong with that. Number 4 is Gandy Dancing. Let's take a look at Gandy Dancing's last race. This is at Saratoga against, as mentioned, he's a New York bred. This is against New York breds, an entry-level allowance race. And he's just much the best in this race. This was a good effort for Gandy Dancing, if only because he didn't, he's a horse who hasn't been that great from the gate in his races, and he wasn't great from the gate in here either, but he wasn't terrible. He had been much worse before this race. He set a really nice trip in mid-pack. You see him just, sort of powering down the outside to run over the horse on the lead, and he's clear to the wire. A very nice performance, another step in the right direction with an 86 Beyer speed figure. This horse has some talent. We'll just see if he's going to be able to improve again as he faces a much better field here. And then we'll also see what kind of price he is, because I just think it's worth pointing out, 4-1 on the morning line, I guess, wouldn't be terrible for a horse who still has upside. He is trained by Chad Brown, and of course, Chad's horses, he does such a good job that his horses just tend to get overbet in their races, and they offer less value than they should. They tend to win their share as well, so there's nothing wrong with that. But, taking short prices, I think in particular on his dirt horses, because his dirt horses tend to get bet just as strongly as his turf horses do, but they don't win nearly as often. So I wouldn't take a short price on Gandy Dancing, but I do think he's a pretty talented horse, and I think he does have a shot in this race. Kerry Times is the 5. He took a pretty big step forward in his last start. Let's take a look at his most recent race as well. This is September 12th at Laurel, going 6 furlongs. It's not a very strong field. He's had a perfect trip in this race, tracking a horse on the lead, clear of the rest of the field. He took over when he was ready to do so. And he just wins this race, as you can see, very easily through the stretch. This is the easiest kind of win. He didn't really have to get all in, and he was, basically geared down at the end. A very easy win for this horse, and a big step in the right direction as well, with a new Beyer top of 79. He's going to have to do better than that against this field. But he does have some tactical speed, and maybe he can improve again. The 6 is Win You Win. He's 15-1 on the line. Listen, he's very lightly raced. He's not fast enough to beat this field as things stand right now, but he did win the first 2 starts of his career sprinting. They tried turf off the layoff back in August, and he didn't run well, but I don't think we need to care about that race. He's probably not a turf horse. And since then, he's finished pretty close in his last 2 races with paired up 74 Beyer. If you look at his race 2 back at Delaware, the short comment says closed fast from off the pace. I didn't see the race that way. I didn't think he was closing fast at all. He was really just forging on all through the stretch there, and he never looked like he was going to get up. He was closest at the end. I didn't think he ran great in there. Last time, I didn't think he ran great either. He was contesting the pace, and he wound up settling for second. I just don't think the horse that beat him is very good, Ace 9-9. So this is a horse who's just going to have to run a lot better than that to be competitive with these horses. The 7 is As Seen on TV. I think this horse actually makes a lot of sense in this race. He has not sprinted since last September, or rather since last November down in Florida. And he won that race very easily with a 91 Beyer speed figure. He has not sprinted since then, but he was a very fast horse early in his career. And, Kelly Breen did what you're supposed to do with your good and fast 2-year-olds. He tried some really tough races for this horse over the winter in Florida. The Mucho Macho Man going a 1-turn mile where he just missed after a very long duel, 98 Beyer speed figure for that race. So he's got these fast races behind him. They tried the Fountain of Youth and Florida Derby to no avail. Those races were just too tough for him. And he, ultimately is probably a horse who just doesn't want to go that far. He came back off the layoff in another really tough spot in the Pegasus over this track. 2-turn, 1.1 miles. A very strong field, Pneumatic and Jesus' team in there, who were just better than As Seen on TV. And as a matter of fact, perhaps better than most of the horses running in this race. I like this horse cutting back for this. I think he's cut out to be a sprinter, cut out to be a better horse sprinting. He is second off the layoff, and he has a real chance to take a step forward in here. We touched on the 8 Johnny Ritt a little bit in the open. I do expect him to be part of the pace. I wasn't sure he was good enough to win. And I sort of felt the same way about he's smoking now. He can sit from off the pace. I just don't know that he was good enough to beat this field. I do think the horse on the outside, though, news to me, at 15-1, he's a stablemate of the morning line favorite Premier Star for Mike Trambetta. I think this horse is a little interesting. I mean, he's going to have to prove at this stage of the game that he can still be effective on dirt, because it seems like at this point in his career, he just might be a little bit better on a synthetic surface. If you go 3 back on his card, they brought him back from a layoff in the Woodstock up at Woodbine, going 6 furlongs on the synthetic track up there. That was a pretty impressive win. He just sat right in behind the lead the entire way, very comfortable tracking off of the pace, and he blew that field away with an 85 Beyer speed figure. His next start came back in New York on the main track where he caught a sloppy sealed track in the Gold Fever and just never really got involved that day, but he just may be a horse who doesn't like a wet track. And they ran him in the Tom Ridge last time, and he was really no factor in that race either. So he does come in off of 2 disappointing performances, but he has a stakes win in relatively fast time. He is a stakes winner on dirt earlier in his career, so you know that there's at least a chance he can still handle this surface. I mean, I just felt like at a bigger price, he was sort of an interesting horse with tactical speed from an outside post. As you'll see when I put the picks up right now, I do have news to me in there. I made him my 3rd pick in this race at a price. But I put Premier Star on top. I realize he's the favorite in here, and there are some interesting other directions to go. And I just think this horse is good. And I think he's back in the right spot here. I think Premier Star is the horse to beat in here. I put As Seen on TV second because I know that he's fast enough to beat this field, and I really like this horse cutting back second off the layoff. I think he deserves a chance to get back to one of his really good races. News to me, Meru, they're both mildly interesting to me. I put them 3rd and 4th in this race, but I'm going to take Premier Star on top. He's the morning line favorite, but I also think he's a very good 3-year-old sprinter. 3-7-10-1 for me in your Wednesday race of the day. It's race number 8 at Monmouth Park, the Jersey Shore. The approximate post time is 4:10 Eastern time. Good luck.